Welcome back to another episode of the RAG podcast, your weekly show in 2021 in season 4, where I bring to you recruitment owners, advisors, suppliers, the latest innovators across the world within the recruitment industry to really unpick what it takes to grow a modern, scalable, successful recruitment agency in 2021. I'm delighted to be back. Last week I was back on my own. I did a quick episode, 30 minutes. Hopefully, if you're watching live or you're listening to this, you tuned in and understood what this year's all about. And today's episode, I'm pumped because I'm joined by my newest member of the Hoxo family, Joel Lalgee. Joel calls himself the human headhunter. Has been in recruitment for over 5 years. Recently flipped into working in the same space as me in Hoxo in terms of more content branding for the recruitment agency market, and having multiple conversations over the last sort of 3 to 6 months, me and Joel decided he was the right guy to take Hoxo to the US. So Joel, welcome to the RAG podcast.
Great to be here, man. This is so long overdue, so it's great to be on the show.
It is. And for those that are watching on YouTube or on LinkedIn Live, because you were wearing your horrendous Liverpool top, I thought I'd put my Manchester City. I put my Man City kit on as well. So we're showing some real rivalries going on right now.
It probably surprised you that I was a Liverpool fan. I mean, maybe not because they had a good year.
Hey, everywhere. They're fucking everywhere, aren't they? Let's be honest. They're absolutely everywhere. So I grew up in Manchester in the 90s, and as a Man City fan, when Man United were unbelievable. And we were talking just before, like 1999, I was at Wembley when Man City played Gillingham in the second division playoff final, and we won it, and thankfully we won it. And then I remember City being awful. Now we're one of the best clubs, the biggest clubs in the world. But growing up, I didn't really know any Liverpool fans. We didn't really have them. We had City and United, and we had a few random supporters and a few Stockport and Oldham and Rochdale and Bolton and Blackburn, but we didn't have any Liverpool fans. And then when I went to uni in Sheffield, I met a few. But then when I went to London, I went to Australia, came back to London, and they're everywhere. Like literally, Liverpool and United.
You're kind of talking about them like there's some sort of like disease or something.
Well, it's like COVID, and it's like the original COVID-19. No, anyone who's listening who's a Liverpool fan has just pressed off, just deleted it. So what makes you support Liverpool?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Blackpool. So obviously everyone in the UK is familiar with Blackpool. Nobody in the US knows where Blackpool is or has ever heard of it.
English Riviera. My mum lives there.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. I tell people it's like the Vegas of the UK.
Oh yeah.
Without any of the money and just a lot more drunk Scottish people. But my granddad, he actually he lived in Liverpool, and a lot of my cousins live there, and so it just kind of made sense. Although one of my uncles is a really big Man United fan, so he was pretty mad that I became a Liverpool fan. So yeah. So I'm not like a fair weathered fan. That's what they call them in the US. It wasn't like I turned a Liverpool fan because they won last year. It was a long, hard road.
Just the year before when you won the Champions League.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look, we'll talk about football. We'll talk about a lot of things. But Joel, you came onto my radar probably about, I don't know, it was about 6, 7, 8 months ago. I saw you on LinkedIn Live. I saw that you were doing some stuff, and who is this guy? I thought you were putting out some really cool content. So I was interested to find out more about you. So can you, for the listeners' benefit, tell us what's your story? How did you get into recruitment? What did it all kick off?
Yeah, so I actually came from the banking industry, so I was doing a lot of like mortgage loans and then just running a bank. So I did that for about 5 years, and banking industry is probably the same as the UK, where it's super regulated. You got to wear a suit, tie. Yeah. It's super professional, and just kind of burned me out. I mean, I was doing long hours, and the pay was okay, but I think it was just grinding numbers for 3 hours in the evening every single night. It just got to me, and one of my mentors / friends said, "Hey, I just started up a recruitment company," and he had been in recruiting for 10 years. So he was like, hey, I just started off this recruitment company. We've got a new kind of recruitment billing model. We think it's really going to take off. You should come work for me. And, at the time I was living in Southern California and he was living in the Midwest. So it meant moving back to the Midwest. And after a couple months of just thinking about it, I just decided, you know what, I'm gonna make the move. And so that was 5 years ago. And so I really, like anyone else, I think I just fell into it. I said, I've never done recruiting. I don't, I've recruited people for the bank, but I haven't ever done actual recruiting. And, his classic answer, and he's a Brit, by the way, and his classic answer was just, you'll figure it out. You'll be able to do it. And so, I kind of got thrown into it day one.
What were you focusing on?
So at that time I was more of a generalist. And the way that they worked is actually really a different type of billing model. So you got contingent, you got retained, you got, staffing and contract. These guys actually had a model where you would basically work hourly and you dedicate 10 to 15 hours on each search. So I'd get assigned 4 searches and then I'd bill 10 to 15 hours per search. And we just for an hourly rate. So it was a really, really unique billing model. And probably the biggest differences were, like, obviously in contingent, if you don't like the search, you can walk away. But obviously if you don't fill it, you don't get paid. With this model, you never got to walk away from a search and you got paid up front. And there's a lot more accountability. So we'd meet with our clients once a week. We'd have to give them updates on where all their searches were. And because of that, the company grew a lot. So in the 5 years I was there, we started with 6 people. And I think that they must be over 80 people now. So, in that 5-year time, saw a lot of growth. Revenue kept growing and growing. But it kind of gave me a unique perspective to recruiting, because I think a lot of people in their first couple of years, they get thrown into it and they got no idea what they're doing. Oh. The mentorship is garbage. It's basically, here's a phone, make it happen. And you know how it is. 20% of people do well. 80% of people just fail out. With this model, it was a little bit of I built really strong relationships with hiring managers in the industries that I focused in, and I'd work with clients for 2 or 3 years at a time. So I really feel blessed just to be able to learn that side of the recruitment agency world. And then I did that for about 5 years, and then I moved over to contingent, and I did that for about 6 months and did fine. Made some placements, made some money, but that was the breaking point for me. I didn't like the contingent model, and I didn't like even the culture of how things were done. And that was when I decided, you know what, I see so much need for marketing and content that I'm gonna make the jump, and I'm gonna switch gears.
Last year, was it early last year?
It was March 2020. That's COVID. When
COVID time.
That's when March 2020 was when I went into contingent. So I started contingent in the middle of COVID. So I had my non-competes from my my prior company, and had to basically build a desk out of scratch and during COVID. So it was the worst time you could start. And I did that for 6 months, and in September, that's when I said, you know what, there's such a need for this marketing. I got to make the jump. So I quit the job, and you know the rest of the story from there.
Yeah, so we got in touch, and you started your own thing, but it was more about getting the deal right between us, wasn't it, and bringing you in to launch our thing. So let's go back a bit in terms of, you said that you realized there was a need for content, because it reminds me of what I felt, but 4.5 years earlier. What do you mean by that? Like, what signs were out there that there was a need for this stuff?
Yeah, I think obviously LinkedIn has evolved a lot, and so for most of us, if we're on the recruiter side of the LinkedIn, you don't necessarily see the news feed as much. But I just take breaks, from sourcing or from messaging people, and I'd see in the news feed, I started seeing a lot of video content in particular. And then even just looking at all of the written content that was out there, I'd see a lot of young creators on the platform. I'd see a lot of people putting out video. And then I guess I was connected with so many recruiters as well. And all I'd see from recruiters was job descriptions, or hey, these are the open jobs that I'm working on, or here's how great our recruitment company is. And there was just such a divide between the type of content that the rest of the creators on the platform were putting on that was getting traction. And it's like every recruiter I knew is like, here's my blog on, how to source the best candidates, or here's my just really boring content is really what it came down to. And then I looked at the company I was working for, and they had some blogs, but when it came to LinkedIn content, it was like nobody was doing anything. And so I think in my mind, I thought, you know what, if no one is doing this, there's an opportunity for me to just start doing content, and maybe I could be, a well-known recruiter in the industry. And so I just started putting out videos of really basic videos, to be honest. I mean, it was like, hey, entry-level recruiters, if you want to get the right candidate, you got to make lots of calls and you got to persevere. And I just started talking about recruiting, and, those first videos were probably, pretty awkward, and they didn't really do that well. But obviously the more and more you do them, the better and better you get. And it was the same on the writing side. I just started writing content about my day. I just, here's what happened with this candidate. Here's what happened with this candidate. I started just writing about questions I was getting. Mm-hmm. And again, that content, if you go back to the beginning of my journey on LinkedIn, I mean, it didn't get any traction. It was pretty much unengaging content.
Yeah.
And so I started from the scratch. But I also realized that nobody around me was doing it. People were looking at me weird, like, why are you showing up on LinkedIn? And I just realized, like, yeah, like this is, and the firm I worked at, they were pretty progressive, and they were trying a new, this new billing option, and they were big into technology. But when it came to the marketing, there was no thought of social media, or how can we use social media to connect with people. And, and then I started looking around, and it was like, I think the only two recruiters I could see on LinkedIn were Adam Posner and you. You guys were the only two that I really saw putting out really, progressive content. I mean, obviously I saw Greg Savage as well. And I think Lou Adler was putting out some stuff as well. But I mean, that's just a handful of people. And I thought, that's where there's opportunity. And like I said, I started doing it. Everyone at the company is like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, and it's weird because you start showing up on LinkedIn. Obviously your first connections see it first. And but then I started seeing people trying to do the same thing, and they'd get to like 3 days and then they wouldn't have anything else to say. And again, that's when I realized, like, okay, maybe I'm more creative than I thought I was. And then that's when I really started seeing the need within the recruitment industry, where I think we're such salespeople and we're so good at hunting. But when it comes to longer techniques and more of like that farming and sowing seeds for the long term, our minds just don't work like that. Yeah. And so again, I just saw that huge need for that within the industry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was talking about this very thing this morning, that I think if I look back at myself as a child at school, right, I would have been described as the guy that was really quite, polite, cheeky, never ever got really in trouble. Yeah. But I'd never talk back to teachers. I was polite. I was well mannered, but they couldn't shut me up, right? So the amount of times they'd look at me like, Sean, if I have to tell you one more time, kind of thing. Like, I'd never get to the point where I'd get in big trouble, but I was a natural chatterbox. It was just who I was. You asked me to sit there and do a homework assignment, and I hated it. I couldn't stand it. But if you'd have asked me to talk about it, I'd have nailed it, right? And it was something that was ingrained in me as a kid. And so when you find a job like recruitment and it plays to those strengths, great. But then something like content comes along.
Yeah.
And you instantly retreat. I remember being at Venquis in my final few years, and we hired a marketing manager, a lady called Alex Bigland, who was wicked. And she was like, right, who's going to get involved in the blog strategy? And I used to avoid it. I'd be like, I'm on the phone, I'm busy, I've got too much going on. And it was more than anything, it was just fear that I would be found out because I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about, or that I couldn't write well. When I then decided to start taking the plunge, I leant towards video more because I was more comfortable. It's crazy. A lot of people are more comfortable with words. I was more comfortable with voice.
Yeah.
And I've had to teach myself to get better with words. And even now, I still don't think it's my strength. But would you say, were you naturally more able to sit there and write down what you were thinking and create a story? Or was it something you had to work with others
I
on?
think, yeah, I think the writing to me came really easily, but I think I would see that in my recruitment style as well. And so I was really, really good at coming up with creative subject lines and creative emails. So, while everyone else is sending, "Hi, John, looks like you're an expert in the industry. Looks like you have the exact qualifications that my client's looking for. Do you have time to talk?" I'd be like, "Hey, John, I know I'm just a lowly recruiter and not worth any of your time, but you have 5 minutes to chat." And I started seeing that I'd get good responses because I just did something that I knew other recruiters wouldn't do. And so the writing part came easy to me. I think the video part wasn't too hard, but I think I was just I think at that time I just wasn't getting the views anyway, so it didn't really matter. So there wasn't any pressure, and because nobody else was doing it, the kind of the standard on LinkedIn in general with videos, I mean, it's pretty low barrier to entry. And when I started doing videos on LinkedIn, everybody was doing a 30-day like video challenge, and I mean, you see these selfies with the camera shaking, and I'm like, okay, well, if that's the standard, then I'm gonna fit right in. But I think the writing side definitely was easier, and luckily on LinkedIn, writing does pretty well. Like if you're a good writer and you know how to write a message, those posts do really, really well. So yeah, it's interesting though, because I never thought about it like that. I think with the video, I think the challenge for most people is how do you get a really short and concise message across without going too long. So I see a lot of people make too long a video, and then you start looking at stuff like this. Like I got LinkedIn Live 3 months into when I got serious with LinkedIn content, and the LinkedIn Live, it's a whole different feel because it's more like what we're doing. It's more of a conversation. But I was able to leverage that LinkedIn Live to start interviewing big names in recruiting because it was before everybody had it really. And so I started reaching out to different people within the industry, starting having interviews. And I did that strategically. So people, as I'd reach out to them, a lot of HR people follow big names in recruiting. And so I thought if I have these big names on my profile, that'll give me more credibility when I'm trying to get into HR and when I'm trying to get into, trying to get some of these sales. And it worked well. And I think that's part of creating content. Like for some reason, when you create content, you establish an authority. It doesn't even really matter what you're saying. The fact that you're saying something, it just builds a natural authority with it.
But I think you've also got to have an opinion and you've got to develop on that opinion. But yeah, I always say that, like, you're split just by saying stuff and having an opinion. You should win 66% of an audience because 33% will agree, 33% will disagree, but 33% will just side with you because you had the balls to say something rather than
exactly
what everyone else is doing. So what was the kind of first impact you saw as a recruiter? What was the first signs that this shit was working for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to track because I did a lot of engaging on other people's content as well, which I think, again, when you're in a recruitment agency, they're not teaching you how to create content, and they're certainly not teaching you how to engage in prospects' content as well. And so that it was kind of both hand in hand worked really, really well together. So I was putting out content as I'm connecting with people. I started seeing the profile views go up. So it was a pretty easy thing to track. I connect with someone, I put out content, and then as soon as they'd view my profile, boom, that was it. I could send them a message because I knew that they knew who I was. So I started seeing that cold outreach just turned into warm outreach. And I have to say, it was probably about 9 months into creating content every day. I got a job order. Someone reached out to me and just said, "Hey, I really, I want to work with you." And I'd changed my profile to the industry I was focusing in at the time. It was construction. And I had a headline that said like your favorite construction recruiter. A lot of my content was geared towards that. And yeah, I was actually specializing in drywall. So I had like your favorite drywall recruiter, and it was commercial drywall projects, which were pretty big, $30 million jobs. So the bigger kind of commercial jobs. And this owner of this drywall company she reached out and just said, send me a contract. And I said, okay. So I sent her the contract and we did an intake call. And obviously like the hardest thing as a recruiter when you're first starting out is getting that time with a client. That call was probably one of the best calls I've ever had because number one, she came to me, she asked me for the contract, and we spoke for an hour. And I was really able to figure out exactly what she needed and just build that rapport. And then obviously from that point, as I started sending her candidates, there wasn't the usual, delay in waiting and are they going to interview my person? There's just that trust built right away. And so that took about 9 months. And then just through other LinkedIn relationships, all the clients I worked with were from either people I've been connected with for a while who had been engaging with. And so, yeah, I think what it does is it just helps you build trust way quicker. But then also it takes that pressure off when you're working with people because they're seeing more of you every day. And even if, I just think about it like if I'm able to put out 5 pieces of content in a week and somebody's able to see it, they know so much more about me without even having that conversation. So I think when people work with me, they'd see my LinkedIn lives, they'd see my video, and they just felt like they knew me right away. And so that helps with every part of the process in recruiting, because obviously for us, it can take years to build a good client relationship. And so if you've got 6 months kind of built in there, which can happen with content because it's just you're in front of them all the time, they're seeing other people engage with you. Then as you start to send them candidates, that trust is there, so that they're just quicker to interview them. So, but I'd say 9 months. That's how long it took for me to get an inbound lead. And I showed my manager that, and she's like, "I've never seen that before." And I said, "I haven't seen it before either. This is the first time." But that was about 3 months before I quit and went solo. And that was the point that I realized, okay, like this is actually possible. It just takes time. It takes consistency. But you've also got to think at that point, I just started a brand new industry. And so I had no credibility with that industry. So my advice would be if you've a really solid recruiter and you've got 10 to 15 years of experience and you've got placed candidates everywhere, you've got old clients everywhere, and you're well known in your industry, you start putting out content, your results are gonna be quicker than mine because I was starting from complete scratch. So
that's probably the biggest byproduct that I think recruiters underestimate when it comes to content. That everyone talks about new business being like the holy grail. We get loads of new leads, loads of new clients, but the question I ask to everyone I ever work with is, and I always get the same answer: would you like to have more regular, meaningful interaction with your existing clients, or maybe the clients you worked with a year ago? They always say yes. Like no one could ever talk to their existing customers enough. Like it's just because you've always got, unless you're completely in account management and you don't speak to anyone new, if you're in a 360 capacity, you can't concentrate on your existing clients. So by having content out there daily, these people see you. These people still feel like they're getting a relationship with you. They're still hearing what you're up to. They're still getting knowledge from you. They're still, and guess what? When they have an opportunity, that you're going to be front of mind, or you're going to be at least in the race of being front of mind. Whereas if you just depend on shit, I haven't called them for 4 months, like I used to, you're relying on your reputation alone, and that in this market is getting more difficult. What sort of time did you put into it in the early days? What was your process around like getting it done? Because it sounds like you were more of a natural email writer than me. Like my days would have been looking at a screen, sending it the odd email, trying to call people. Like it was contract recruitment. It was on the phone all day. It was like chain to your ear. So yours might have been a bit different. How did you go about it early on?
So obviously I didn't have any teaching. I didn't have any kind of guide. I didn't have any framework to work off. I hadn't taken a content class. Nobody in my company was doing it. So I had to figure out everything. So in those early days, I was spending 4 to 5 hours a day, mainly engaging with people. Actually, that was because no one was engaging with my content. So I was out there so much engaging with other people, and really taking in all of the content that was around. So what, how that would look in a day, it'd be, probably an hour and a half to 2 hours in the morning. That's when I'd write my content. I'd put my content out, and then I'd spend time engaging with other people that I'd see in my news feed, first of all, because they were active on LinkedIn. And then I'd probably do about an hour at kind of lunch break. And in the evening, I'd just be on the mobile I guess while I'm watching Netflix, instead of just completely tuning out with it, I would just be engaging with people in the evening. And I think the engagement part is a big part that people miss as well. And it was a mix. I was engaging with people who showed up on my newsfeed. So I had clients, I had candidates that I worked with. And then I also had other creators as well. And so I started building actually a relationship with other creators on the platform locally to me. And that helped a lot because a lot of those people then supported my content. So I think that that's a piece that people miss. Like with LinkedIn, like you have to put in work with engaging with people, and you got to have a strategy. So in those early days, it was 4 to 5 hours, and then once I got the job that I got, the contingent job that I got in March, that was in office, so I couldn't just spend all my day on LinkedIn. I mean, I was going in and doing 2-hour call blocks, kind of the standard recruitment thing. So at that point, my usage went down a little bit, and then I had to do things early in the morning, had to do it in the evening, and then I still do it on my lunch break. But that's when I started developing more of a strategy around, okay, here are my prospects, and really starting to track like what my prospects were posting and starting to engage with them. And that again, it's super powerful because when you look at LinkedIn, when people post, they don't get a lot of traction. So if they've got 3 comments on one of their posts and then you show up and you're the 4th, they're going to see your name. Yeah. And I would look at the other comments and it'd be like, great post, or like cool, or, just really smart. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to just leave a longer comment here.
With a question.
And yeah, more of a question, something that they could engage with. And, and that also really, really helped open the door, just to some more warm conversations. And so, but I noticed nobody in the agency I was working at, nobody was doing anything like this. And so I think it was unusual to them until they start seeing, obviously, the results from that, which is just, it's brand awareness is what it comes down to as well.
I'm interrupting this episode of the RAG podcast to bring you a message from our sponsor, Odro. You know by now that Odro are the #1 video interview platform for recruiters around the world. Now, they keep bringing out new features, from Odro Capture to Odro Producer, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. But now, recently, they've just announced a new feature to the platform, which is a complete game changer. During COVID-19, they realized that the recruitment audience, the communication was changing. Globally, their clients and candidates were using Microsoft Teams and Zoom more than anything else. The phrase, let's jump on a Zoom call or jump on a Teams call, has actually replaced the words video interview for a lot of their conversations over the last 6 months. Now, they were thinking, how are we going to eradicate this? How are we going to make Odro the name that everyone talks about for the interview process? And they realized they didn't need to. They needed to integrate. So for the first time ever, they're the first video interview platform on the planet that have decided and managed to integrate with Zoom and soon to be integrated with Microsoft Teams. So with one click, after recording a Zoom video, you can now drag that into Odro and create everything else that Odro has, from adding the CV, the heat maps, the capture, and the producer elements. You get all the benefits of Odro before and after the interview, but you get to use Zoom, which is client-friendly on all levels. So this is massive. Teams is coming. It's the first time anyone's ever done it in our sector, and it is literally going to change the way you work in 2021. Get in touch with my friends over at Odro at odro.co.uk, or if you're already a user, reach out to your account manager to make sure you've got this feature. Back to the show.
The age-old debate of whether awareness matters and whether it's a real stat and whether it's real ROI, but when you see the views going up, when you see your profile views going up, when you see the content views going up, you forget they're real people. Like when you get, like, I've had people on my academy say, yeah, I only got 1,000 views on that post, Sean. Like, what can I do? And I'm like, how long would that take you to phone 1,000 people and just say what you said on that post? And like, what do you mean? I was like, well, if you rang them all and just regurgitated what you put in the post, how long would that take? They'd be like, God knows. I'm like, exactly. Like, it took you 15 minutes to write it. Like, and if you lined 1,000 people up in the courtyard outside your office, that'd look quite substantial, wouldn't it? And they're like,
exactly.
Well, so
it compounds too. I mean, you think about 1,000 views a day, 365,000 views a year. And then all you got to do is you got to look at how much ad spend would be on Facebook. I mean, to get 365,000 views, you're at least, 10 to 15 grand. And if you've built your network really, really specific to your industry, then that's 1,000 targeted views. So if you got 3,000 people in your network and they're all people that you want to work with or you've worked with, good chance those 1,000 people all within your target market, which is huge. And those views are a little bit misleading. It doesn't mean that everybody engaged with it, but what they saw was your face and your headline in their newsfeed. And I think that's a piece that people forget. And the more you do that, if you're showing up every day, that's why you go to my profile pic, you'll see I've got a red banner around it and it's me looking inviting. Why? Because that's going to stand out to people. So if you see that 5 days in a row, that's when you start clicking on the profile. And so you got, again, in the recruitment agency world, nobody's got their marketing hat on. It's all the sales hat, which makes sense because as an agency owner, you want the results quickly as possible. But the problem is we're just reaching that age where what used to, 30 calls a day, which could have been the standard, turns into 50 calls, then it turns into 100 calls, then it turns into 150. And the effectiveness of just the pure outbound it's getting lower and lower and lower and lower. And so you have to put that marketing hat on. So that's why, to me, and this isn't just in recruiting, this is in sales and marketing in general.
Yeah, of course.
And you see this, I think tech is, if you want to look at examples of markets that recruitment should be following, it should be the tech market, because those guys are always on the forefront of everything. And all of these SDRs, these AEs, they're all active on LinkedIn because they're starting to see, okay, the simple salesperson, of the future, they're going to have to understand marketing as well and branding, because you're not just fighting against the manual people anymore. You're fighting against automation, automated drip campaigns. There's so much distraction. So you have to be able to separate yourself. And I think right now, content, it just makes the most sense. And I think if you don't learn how to do that, in the future, when more platforms come out, more social platforms come out, which they will, if you haven't learned that skill, you're going to be really, really far behind in the future. And I think you got to listen. You got to think about who you're getting your advice from. If you're getting your advice from somebody that's about to retire in 5 years or 10 years, you're listening to the wrong person. They're not going to be around. They don't care. Let them do their thing. You need to be looking at who are the people who are up and coming. Mm-hmm. They're the people that you want to follow. So I think, to me, that was really a struggle when I was at this last agency, because there was all the focus was on the outbound. And I joined it with a couple new people who were right out of college, for example. And I could just see like the burnout factor happening in 3 months, 6 months. And obviously I had experience going into it. So I was a little bit different, and I understood the flow and I understood some of the industry. So I did have an advantage coming in. But I just think, like, why do we have such big turnover in the industry? It's because we're setting people up just to burn out at the end of the day. And I think that marketing and branding and understanding how that fits into the sales picture is just crucial going forward. I don't see any other way around it.
No. The funny thing is, marketing actually enhances the outbound. That's the biggest impact I've found of all of it. It's not even the inbound's great, but if you do it and you still value outbound engagements. Now, I don't call people, but I send voice notes, DMs, video messages.
Exactly.
The response rate is incredible because they see you, they understand you. Like you say, they've built trust with you. And across our client base, that's what we're working on is how do we take an agency that have been traditionally reliant on outbound calls and have only ever used LinkedIn for searching and job posts, and creating those mini desk universe characters that are each building a brand that collectively builds to the common brand of the agency. Because again, recruiters don't think like this, but marketers think personification. They think, how do we identify our ideal customer profile and how do we get in front of them from a marketing perspective? The problem we have in recruitment is always going to be the sheer volume of those profiles when you're working in an agency of complex teams and landscapes and locations is insane. Like, I know 10-man bands that have 10 divisions in 10 locations in different industries, and one campaign will never satisfy.
Exactly.
You can't. So
yeah, because if you're working on construction and then you've got accounting and finance, how does your marketing team get in front of both of those parties? You can't with that one campaign.
The only way is by training at a desk level. That's the only way. Having like anchored campaigns that that certain people can work on for this quarter, and we're going to dedicate to the next group and another quarter or whatever. But there's uniform things you can tweak that each team can be running at the same time. Like, salary surveys, for example, they work because they're valuable and you can just change the data that's in them per team. But if you're talking about cutting edge innovation now for recruiters, it's about desk level ability to influence online. And then there's another thing. I want to know your opinion on this. So, one of the things about bigger corporations, which we're starting to work with some bigger corporations, we're having some talks with some really big companies in the US and in the UK. Some of them have these social media policies, don't they? Where they say, you can only talk about the following things on LinkedIn, and they control what their teams are allowed to put out on a daily basis. And what's your thoughts on that?
Look, my thoughts on that is if you've got to have that policy, I don't know why you hire the people that you hire in the first place. And I think, when I look at, it depends what industry I guess you're in. If you're in financial industry, I can understand it because it's regulated, if you're a financial advisor. But in recruiting, I think you've got to trust your people. And I think obviously if you start training your people on how to do content, you want to monitor it. But I think, you hire people for a reason. And if you hire good people, you've got to trust them with content. And I think, obviously on Facebook and Instagram, it's a little bit different because obviously the type of content is different, but we're talking about LinkedIn here. So I think everybody agrees, there's definitely, I think everybody kind of puts limits on themselves with LinkedIn. Most people do. So I think that fear is just irrational. I think it's super old school. And I think if you're looking to attract like top up and comers and you're thinking 10 years into the future, people use social media. And so you've got to accept that. And I think how you can attract really top players in the market nowadays is by having individuals within your company putting out content, because what it says to an onlooker is, wow, that's a cool company. Wow, I'd want to be a part of that organization. So I just think it's old school. And I just think, what's the worst that can happen? Let's say the worst thing happened and they posted something that's really controversial and it goes viral, you just got a ton of exposure at the very least. And if that happens, then obviously you can take corrective action. But I think let your people be the people. And to me, that's attractive for attracting top talent to your agency as well. Like if you want $1 million or £1 million billers to come to your agency, the best way to do that is to look cool online. Like if I'm a top person, I'm gonna do research on you. And if you've got an awesome podcast with really cool guests, that's attractive. If you've got awesome video content, that's attractive. If I go on there and I got this stale website and it just looks like everybody, there's nothing online, that's a massive turnoff nowadays because people want to be part of innovation. They want to be part of something that's different and unique. And I think with content, you really get the opportunity to do that. And I think the more you monitor it and the more you put restrictions, the less you're able to let your people actually be your people, which is actually what does well on LinkedIn anyway. And I think we both know this, like the content that does well on LinkedIn, like the viral content or the content that gets tons of views, it's usually driven by the story of the individual that wrote it. Like if you look at every single viral post, it's a story that person is telling. And so I think the better you can train your people to be natural storytellers around recruitment, the better your content's going to do. And you're going to attract better candidates, better recruiters, and your awareness is going to skyrocket. So to your point, if you've got 10 recruiters on your team, all of them are getting 1,000 views. That's 10,000 views a day. That's 3 million views in a year. And that's when you start, you have to look at the bigger picture. And then you do that for 10 years. You do that for 2 years, everybody in the industry is going to know who you are. It's a fact. And then it starts to feed into the business development and you start getting inbound leads. So I say, let your people be your people. If they trust them, that's why you hired them. And I think it's massive disservice to censor people in that way.
No, I agree. I completely agree.
A final interruption to today's episode to introduce Vincere. Vincere is the all-in-one CRM ATS platform built for the recruitment and staffing industry. Now, I first heard about these guys about a year ago. the amount of prospect recruitment agencies and clients I was working with that were telling me they were moving over to Vincere, I had to look into it. And what I found was a business that had a global reach with multiple offices around the world. So they've got this follow the sun methodology, which allows them to support recruitment businesses wherever you are and be in your time zone. But the technology that they've invested in is becoming a disruptor in the space. More and more recruitment businesses are doing this to give their recruiters a competitive advantage. They broke into the G2 Crowd's momentum grid as a market leader based on their reviews from their customers. So the agencies that are using this platform are raving about it. Now, if you're a RAG listener and you're thinking about changing CRM, or you're a new business looking to launch with a new CRM, then I would get in touch with these guys, because if you mention that you're a RAG listener, they're doing an amazing deal. By visiting www.vincere.io/RAG, you can get an exclusive deal which offers 2 months completely free on a 2-year commitment, or 3 months completely free on a 3-year commitment. This applies to all licenses that you've either signed up for now or that you'll add in the duration of the contract. So get on there and have a look. Finally, if you're listening and you're a recruiter and you're thinking, I want to move into a more of a business development role, and I'd like to keep hold of my recruitment knowledge. Well, these guys are recruiting for a BD person, well, multiple roles in both Sydney and London right now. So if you've got a strong recruitment background, you want to move into BD and you want to work for a fast moving tech business that's helping people like you right now, then get in touch via their website, because they're hiring today. Back to the show.
It's interesting because, we were kind of thinking the same things from across the world. And that was probably one of the reasons why I enjoyed my first interaction with you, is that I felt like we saw things in the same way. We saw the same vision for the industry. So what was it that made you consider joining us? Because you've just started in the new year with Hoxo, leading our US business. What made you obviously I've had those conversations, but why did you make that decision?
Yeah, so the kind of the business I was running basically became like a ghostwriting service. So I was writing content for people, and I love writing content, but try writing 80 LinkedIn pieces of content that are unique a week. That's a lot, and it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. So I think the natural evolution of my business was to either find somebody operational or find somebody to partner with. And I did look, and I really couldn't find anyone. And so, I've been listening to the RAG for, at least 15, 16 months. Really, really right at that point that you did Adam Posner's live, or he was on your podcast. That's when you got on my radar. And so I would listen to the podcast all the time. And I think just hearing the conversations that were going on, and then obviously you share a lot about your vision for recruiters in general, that shaped a lot of why I did the things I did on LinkedIn. So for me, it was, it's so hard. It's like, it's almost like, I think I had vision for you guys being in the US, like before we even talked. Like I was like, oh, if I was to partner with someone or be able to help them, I would love this situation. And I think when we had the conversation originally, you said, yeah, we're maybe thinking about it. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so making a big change like this, it takes a lot. And so I think, like you said, it's just like visions aligning. And if I'm going to sell something, I want to sell something that I believe in. And I think this is also the power of podcasting. Like before we talked, I felt like I knew you because I've been listening to you for a year. And that's huge because, I'm in Chicago and you're in the UK, and I feel like I know you, and I talk to other people in the industry that over here that know you, and that's the power of podcasting. That's the power of content. So I think it makes sense. And I think when we had conversations, sometimes you can have a conversation with someone and they're like, no, this is my way. This is my way. We're only doing it my way. And I think the unique thing with having conversation with you is you're like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So I feel like there's room for me to be involved and add, as well as learn a lot as well. So it's win-win, man. I mean, except for the fact that you have that Man City shirt.
You can't have everything, Joel. You can't have everything, can you?
That's true.
So what do you think? Like, so what's your vision of the difference between the US and the UK recruitment market right now? Like, what are the main things that are different about the way that we work?
I think the UK in general as a culture, I think just technology wise, for example, you guys are just more advanced. So I remember, because I'm from the UK, so I would go over to the UK quite regularly and visit when I was younger. And I remember like cell phones is a great example.
Yeah.
You guys had camera phones, and in the US, we didn't have camera phone. And I think we were 2 years behind the US. And so I think because of where you're centrally located, I think the culture is always, I don't know, just more innovative and kind of open to newer ideas. And I think the challenge within the US is there's a lot of like really long-standing agencies that have done things for 20, 30, 40 years. And I think in America, there's just more, there's more of a tradition-based society. So people love tradition. They love doing things like the way they've always done them. So I think there's just that psychological thing more so in the UK. Or sorry, more than in the UK. So I think there's that difference. But I will say, I mean, a lot of the conversations that I'm having right now, the pandemic is just, I mean, I think globally, whether you're in e-commerce, whether you're in, manufacturing, whatever industry you're in, everybody is thinking about digital, and it makes 100% sense. So I think there's a lot of companies in the US that are more open, but as I'm having conversations, you can just tell it's just more traditional over here. And you got to think over here too, it's like fees are bigger as well. There's a lot bigger fees. So I think that kind of adds to, and there's a lot of long-standing relationships over here as well. So I think over here, if you're smart, in 3 to 5 years, you can get like a really solid book of business and really good relationships, and they do last a long time. So yeah, I just kind of look more old school. So I don't know. What do you think? I mean, you've had some conversations over here.
Yeah, I think the one thing I probably have more conversations with people going to the US from here, and the attitude is there's an excitement about going to the US from a British perspective, because just yesterday, a client was saying how you get out there and people are working how they've always worked. So when we bring our attitude of no holds barred sales and contingent but aggressive, and then creating new solutions around it, and we're very niche, we focus on these roles, and we've got another guy that focuses on that role. And you said at the start you were quite generalist. It seems like recruiting firms are a bit more generalist in some instances. I feel like there's an excitement that we're going and we're snapping up business fast from the UK. With that, you don't want to create a resentment in the US that we're just there to take the business, but it definitely is an exciting proposition for we've been tracking it for about 2 years. We've been watching clients that are going over there and working out what's going well, what's not going well. So it was always on our radar, but I always was confident that I always felt like I needed to find someone who could do the things I do there. So it's not about the Sean show, me being on in the US, and that's where you've come in, which is really exciting. Who do you think's doing well in the US? So what brands, what recruiters, who stands out from a content and turning it into a successful business perspective? Who could people in the UK or the US look out for as strong brands to keep an eye on?
Man, that's a really great question. I think I've been focused pretty internally as well. So I've seen more people popping up, but I think, and I know I've mentioned him a couple of times, but Adam Posner, I think he's somebody who, from like a content machine standpoint, he is the person that I would be trying to model things after. I don't necessarily agree with all of his strategy in terms of his full approach, but I think if you look at how he runs his podcast, and then how he takes that podcast content and recycles it, he's really, really smart. And he comes from a really strong marketing background. So based on his background and experience, he would be the person that I try and follow the most if I was starting out. And then there's a guy over here called David Stephen Patterson. I don't know if you're aware of him. DSP, he goes by. He's got some really good content as well. So yeah, I think, man, it's so hard because it's just not, my focus hasn't necessarily been like other people as well. But I think what I am seeing now is more and more recruiters popping up with content and podcasts as well. So I think I think we're just going to see more and more people. But I think in general with content, I think everybody's kind of modeling. A lot more people are modeling guys like Gary Vee, Grant Cardone. I mean, those are the guys who are laying the foundation, for people to come under and understand like how you get content and how you use it for brand. And I'm also seeing a lot more podcasts show up as well. And I think everyone I talk to who has a podcast, they're using it for business development. I think the biggest area of improvement I see for most people is they're too one-dimensional with the podcast. So they're either seeing it as just business development and then they're not using the content. And I think that's why you guys do a really good job with that, because you don't just use a podcast for, building relationships, and you're using it for content as well. And so I think if you're not doing that and you're not missing, you're missing that, I think that's the advice I give people. And then
people never want to come on your show if they think it's just your business development and they never hear about it. Whereas, we get approached daily from people about being on the show. And it's because they see what we're doing and they see the consistency.
Well, you enjoy it too. And I think that's the biggest piece I think for everybody with this is, if you go into content and you're just thinking, hey, I'm going to check off the boxes, you failed right from the get-go. And so I cringe when I am with a prospect and they say, yeah, we just talked to this marketing company and they're going to do for, $1,000 a month. They're going to handle all 3 of our socials. I'm like, you might as well take that $1,000 and burn it, because the content's going to be so bad. And I think the people that fall in love, and it doesn't, there's so many different types of content, because some people might fall in love with blogs. If you fall in love with blogs, then write a lot of blogs. If you fall in love with video, then double down on video. If you love these interview style podcasts, then do a live stream podcast. And I think, but you got to enjoy it, because if you set up a podcast or a live stream and you're just flat and, hey, how's it going? It's like, that's terrible too. So to your point, I think you have to figure out like, what type of content do I enjoy? And the best way to look at that is like, what kind of content do I consume? And then start doing that. And then I think the up and coming thing right now, guys, is Clubhouse. That's Clubhouse is what I think is going to be. I think we're going to see a lot of people emerging on that platform pretty quickly, and we're already seeing that. And I think that's another great opportunity that, I'm already seeing people from the UK on that platform, and I think that's gonna change things. And I think it's actually going to level the field in some ways. But you need a strategy, and I think that's the big piece that I see is like, you've got to have a clear strategy with what you're doing and you're approaching these things. But you've also it's got to come organically. You've got to enjoy it. And, and at the same time, it's a challenge when you first start. So that's why I'm excited about working with you guys, because I'm looking at like our academy, for example. If I look at myself, I would have accelerated where I'm at right now if I had a program. Like if my recruitment agency had said, hey, Joel, are you interested in doing this 8-week program to learn like actually how to do this stuff? I would have done it in a heartbeat, because the amount of time that it takes to learn what works and what doesn't.
Oh yeah.
And then managing a full desk, and then managing, current clients. It's a lot. So I think that to me is exciting. And I think having that strategy is a key if you want to be successstive with it. And I think trying new stuff out,
We've both done it as well. That's the difference. Like, we're not just selling something that we don't do. Like, I've been a recruiter and I've lived this journey for 4 years. The foundation of the academy came from my own learnings and the shit that took me 4 years to figure out. And there's a lot in there. Like, the funny thing is,
how many times would you say you've posted over the last 4 years?
I'd say about 1,000 at least. I'd say about 250 times a year minimum. I think last year I did about 400. I got that email from LinkedIn. I did about 400 posts. So probably that was the biggest year of content. So at least 1,000, 1,200 times, and I just don't miss days. Like I wake up and I plan my stuff on a Sunday. That's my day. So every Sunday, 8 a.m., I sit with a coffee. I tell the dog to shut up, even though he doesn't understand English yet. And I sit there and I plan out what I'm going to do. And sometimes I'll record a video or I'll find a video that we've already got, and I'll be watching old YouTube clips and things that we've got. And I'm thinking, right, what do I want to talk about? And I leave room because things can happen in the week that change everything. And, I might wake up in the morning and I feel something or have a conversation. But usually I plan 5 days worth of content on a Sunday. So realistically, for me on a weekday, I just copy and paste it. Like I get it out. I don't spend hours. I'm now spending, a couple of hours on LinkedIn engaging more than I ever did, because I feel like now you need to do it even more than you did before because of the amount of attention and competition on the platform. But yeah, if you're planning ahead, it's really, it's like anything. It's plan to fail to plan to fail. That's how I look at it. And then you will have ideas on the fly every single day as well. It is, Clubhouse is something that, we're going to start looking at it together and what we can do for Hoxo. It's interesting. I'm watching more than I'm engaging with it now at the moment. And I'm finding it's just quite funny to see the frantic nature of people.
Oh, I know. It's look, in social media, clout comes, clout goes. It's those that are in it for the marathon. Those are the ones that win. So I know people. I talked with a guy yesterday. He's like, he was on there for a week and he got 8,000 followers. And we're just kind of laughing about it because he's on LinkedIn. He's got like about 5,000 followers and a good guy. I was just laughing. I was like, it's so funny because at the end of the day, with a platform like that, following count's just not going to matter. What you say in really short spurts is what's going to matter, and how much credibility you have. And if you get 20,000 followers, but you just don't know anything, like, people are going to listen to you. And in 6 months' time, they're going to unfollow you because they're like, what is this guy even talking about? So it's a unique platform. And I think everybody's looking at it like, TikTok, whatever, 2 years ago, where it's like, I could have 100 million followers. And it's just not that type of platform. It's audio. So for anyone who doesn't know, it's like an audio based platform. It's almost like being part of an interactive podcast. So you have people that lead a room, you can put your hand up and you can engage. And it's a very interesting idea for content, because it's not based on, you can't hide behind, fancy images. You can't hide behind good looks. It's literally based on what you have to say and how well and how much you know. And so I'm in some of the LinkedIn rooms, for example, and it's just, it'd be really clear for people to know if I didn't know what I was talking about, because if they asked me a question, I just wouldn't have an answer in the moment consistently. And but I think there's a lot of application for recruiters in that in the future. And I think it's going to push us to, like you said in the beginning, it's like you can be a recruiter for 10 years and not know anything. And so I think it's going to push us to really learn about the industries that we're in and like just get better. And I think it's going to weed out people as well, especially on social media, because there's a lot of people that have bought into buying followers, just, kind of virality and all this sort of stuff. But in the long term with all of this, it's not what happens in a month or 2 months. It's like, where are you at years from now, 5, 10, 15? And I think if you just pace yourself and you're slow with it and you focus on quality, you focus on impact and relationships, you do well on social media. And it's like followers matter. I actually think they bored it out, because I think we've messed up with followership and what it means. And social media, when it was created, it was like Facebook was created for connection. LinkedIn was created for connection. And like 5 years ago, suddenly it turned into influence and followers and all this sort of stuff. And that's kind of happening on LinkedIn as well. But it's about how quick can you turn an online conversation into a real life collaboration or relationship. And I think that's a skill set which, we're all learning as well. And you can do that through content, but it happens through engaging as well. So be interesting to see what happens with that platform.
It's exciting. Well, Joel,
I love it.
We've got a big 2021 ahead. I'm delighted to have you, apart from that disgusting top you're wearing, which we won't again. Amber's actually commented on LinkedIn Live, my business partner, saying, big fan of that top, Joel.
Good man.
Another awful Liverpool fan that I have to deal with on a daily basis. But that's just, feel sorry for me all you want. But Joel, we're really excited to have you on board. It's insane what you've done on LinkedIn in the last year. I've watched your climb is incredible. let's see what this year brings. If anyone's listening and wants to reach out and just ask you any questions regarding Hoxo or not, LinkedIn, best place, potentially Clubhouse. Now they can listen to one of your rooms, get involved.
I would say LinkedIn, if you're going to reach out, just put a personal message saying, hey, because I think right now I got 3,000 invitations in the inbox, and just put a personal message. Saw you on the rag, got some questions. Twitter is a good place to reach me too, because I'm not that big on there. Instagram also is good. And then Clubhouse daily, I'm on there. I'm part of a LinkedIn mastery session where it's really cool. You just can get on stage and ask questions. And then I do one in the morning as well. So I'm kind of in and out of that platform, but it's just Joel Lalgee. If you Google me, I'm the only Joel Lalgee in the world. So that makes it easy. And, just reach out. And then Joel at hoxomedia.com if you've got questions. And I think we're gonna take the US by storm. And I think, what is it? Is it tomorrow or Thursday that you're on my podcast? So I'm excited about it.
Tomorrow is Thursday, Joel. So
that's how crazy 2021 is.
It's 2:30 p.m. I don't know, it's like breakfast where you are, but tomorrow night UK time, I think 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. I'm on your live show. So we'll reverse the questions. We won't wear this again. I'll try and check. I'll find something better to wear. But always a pleasure, mate. Thank you for joining us. We'll get you back.
Great to be here.
Involved in some more episodes. A nice little message from Grace Rains to both of you. That was really helpful in the session. No problem. Thank you, Grace.
Thanks, Grace.
Anyone else who's listening live on LinkedIn, and if you've not connect with us both, ask us any questions. I'll be back again 1:30 next week. Next week, I am excited. Right, I'm joined by James Brown, the founder and CEO of Storm2. Storm2 started in the middle of 2019, having with the guys that left Faden International. So Faden are one of the fastest growing brands in the UK history. They went from one guy, Adam Buck, to over 800 staff in 10 years. Super aggressive brand, 8 brands around the world. I interviewed some of their leaders, and I was like, there's an energy about these guys. Anyway, Storm2 is the second iteration of the leadership team, and James has handpicked people from Faden. Adam Buck, who was the founder, is now on board as a chairman, and they're over 50 staff in a year and a half. They're hiring 120 people this year. They're launching multiple brands. I think Storm 3, Storm 4, Storm 5 are the next brands. It's insane what this guy's doing, what he's throwing at it. He's got institutional investment. So next Wednesday at 1:30 on LinkedIn Live, me and James Brown are going to chew the fat about how you grow a modern recruitment agency at pace, which is
awesome.
For some people, that's what it's all about. But if you're listening on the YouTube or on the podcast, please do leave your comments, give us a rating. If you've enjoyed today's show and you think there's more people in our sector, in your network, that would benefit from myself and Joel's information, then please share the show, WhatsApp, text, email, whatever. Get it out. More people that will listen together. We're going to have a stronger industry. If you see yourself as a modern recruiter and modern recruiters, get them on this show. If you're not, then I don't think this is the place for you. Leave it. Go listen to something else. I'll be back again next week. In the meantime, stay safe. I'll see you soon.